Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next session. I am so excited to welcome you. This is going to be fantastic follow-up from our opening panel on measurement. We have one of our OG scaling up speakers returning to the stage, and she's going to walk us through how she built an integrated data framework to really help guide patient acquisition and forecast growth. So I'm pleased to welcome Teresa Porcaro, the VP of Marketing and Growth from Public Rehabilitation Medicine. She is going to walk us through this very detailed. She brings so much insight and tactical advice on how to get this done. So I'm really thrilled to welcome you back, Teresa. And from here, you can take it on. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. I'm really excited to be here for my third Scaling Up. You guys get better and better every year, so I'm thrilled. And yes, so as she said, I'm going to give a presentation today on how at Public Rehabilitation, PRM, we have been able to, on the marketing team, begin to forecast growth and patient acquisition with our data infrastructure. I do tend to go into a lot of detail on this, and I will save time for questions at the end. A lot of my team is definitely here and has joined, so if you're popping questions in the chat, I'm sure they'll be answering. But yeah, let's just dive into it. As she said, I'm the VP of Growth and Marketing here at PRM. I have been with the org for over 3 years now. When we got here, transparently, we had no marketing org. One of our biggest challenges was building marketing from the ground up, but also as a PE-backed company, data, proving it. I always say to my team and to everyone, if there's no data, it didn't happen. I came from tech before this, spent a long time, over 10 years in B2B tech, and we used Salesforce. Here at PRM, if it's not in Power BI, if it's not in Morpheus, it doesn't exist. And so being in a marketing position where all of our data sources are in Google Ads, Google Analytics, Facebook, 50 million places, that was a challenge. Saying we got all these leads, but not being able to tie it down to the admin in the office was certainly something that we needed to solve for. I won't say it happened overnight. I won't say that, suddenly 3 months into the job, I was able to walk into my CEO's office and say I was proving it. But I will say that over about 2 years, I now can predict revenue and forecast leads in our 14 locations, and we can tie a patient lead down to an admin in the office. So let's get into it. If I can move my slides forward. So a little brief agenda here. So what's the challenge? The challenge really, and the problem, I think, in healthcare organizations that we've been talking about really the last 2 days, is that data is in silos. So marketing measures lead generation and conversion effectiveness. We bring in a bunch of leads. We're doing it through paid media. We're doing it organically. We're doing it through ads. We're doing it on billboards. We're doing it in events. The operations team is tracking the calls that are coming in. They're tracking scheduling. They're tracking the patients and the visits, and they're tracking the admits that come in, or the surgeries in our case. We have 2 lines of business. So we have our non-operative line of business at PRM, and we have our surgical line of business. We have that across 14 locations nationwide. Each location has a surgical line of business and a non-operative line of business. So for marketing, we have to drive that patient acquisition and demand across all those lines of business. Finance is analyzing the revenue and the cost and the efficiency metrics, and they want to say, okay, Teresa, you're spending all this money to drive patient acquisition, and we want to understand the CAC. We want to understand how you're driving those patients. And not only that, they want me to be able to look at the budget and the forecast and say, if this office needs to have 50 patients in order to be profitable, how are you going to drive those 50 patients? How many leads do you need? 3 departments, 3 truths. And so we needed to get to a place where all of these departments are talking to one another and speaking the same truth. So at some point, marketing builds this beautiful funnel. We've all seen this funnel before. I felt good about this funnel for quite some time. I felt like, okay, I can truly tell you how many marketing appointment requests are coming in. We can even understand how many appointments are getting scheduled of those appointment requests. we got to a place where through our data in Power BI, we understood how many new patient visits were coming from that and how many admits were coming from that. We broke it into Excel, like every marketer has ever done in their entire life. We built an Excel spreadsheet. We were able to tell you the lead sources. We were able to tell you the conversion rates of those lead sources. We were celebrating record-breaking leads, but then intake was saying there's no calls. The offices were saying we're not getting enough patients. At one point, I was in liquor studio, like we've all been before, tracking those patients down to what sources they were coming from. Is organic bringing me more leads than paid in a certain location? Should I drop more money into this office for this specific strategy? I felt like we were really getting to a very good data-driven place. However, the disconnects in the funnel was just completely broken. We were not able to understand truly, because we weren't able to see it on the business side, how these marketing appointment requests were translating through. And we were pretty advanced. We were nurturing our leads. We were understanding where the fall off was. We were using ECW data to understand the reasons for cancellation, the reasons for non-schedule. In a HIPAA compliant way, we were going back and doing what we could. But at the end of the day, if, they're not getting scheduled, or worse, they're not showing up in the office, does it really matter? If a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to see it, did it really fall? Did it make a sound? And it kind of became like my reputation era, my villain era. For those of you who are Taylor Swift fans, I kind of just sat there and said, well, if I've generated 2,000 leads this month and operations says we don't have any new patients, like, what am I going to do? So I really became this massive champion for Salesforce. And I said, okay, let me go back to basics. When I worked in tech, Salesforce was the source of truth. I know that with Salesforce, I can bring every marketing data source into Salesforce, and I know that then I can see what's happening. It led to a 2-year process where I had to get operations, finance, executive team, data team, everybody needed to get on the same page. So here is kind of what happened and what the vision was. So one source of truth, we wanted marketing data, operations data, finance data, all unified. I wanted a way to say when marketing has a lead and the call center schedules it, an NPS, and then operations sees the new patient visit and the admit, I wanted finance to see the revenue. I needed all these stakeholders on the left-hand side bought in. I needed third-party integrations. I needed to get FreshPain on board. I know that they've been speaking at the summit. I needed a CDN. I needed all my data hashed, because if I'm going to start to track everything a patient is doing, I really don't want PRM to have a lawsuit. So first things first, I had to get all of our GTM tracking, all of our Google Analytics, all of our marketing data, as we all know it, compliant. So that's step one. Then I needed to get on the phone with ECW. If you work with ECW or any other patient management system, you know that you need the patience of a saint. So add that to your list. Then I needed to get Elevate involved. That's our phone system. We worked really closely with Cardinal, as they are really our web developers in this sense, to figure out how we were going to get our forms migrated over. So previously we were using JotForm as our, HIPAA compliant form system. We wanted to move all of our forms to Salesforce forms. Why? Because Salesforce can add those, those cookies and hidden codes in the back end that allow us to essentially report all of that data into Salesforce in a way that it is, one, HIPAA compliant, and two, gives us the data that we need, because we needed those like key integration points on your marketing sources. So you want your calls, your clicks, your form fills, every lead source. And this is paid, this is organic, this is everything. I basically wanted the marketer's dream come true. I wanted to understand not just our paid sources, but your organic sources. I wanted the phone system integrated. I wanted when a lead came in and our call center was calling, the data to be there. And then this is going to be the real kicker. I wanted everything bi-directional into ECW. Right now, we at PRM use Power BI to take all of our data from ECW and all of our patient interactions to understand when a patient becomes a new patient visit, and then there's 6 appointment types in our non-operative, side of the business. They get a series of 6 injections, and then there's surgery. So we wanted to understand each one of those points to be able to tie it down to revenue data. I wanted it bi-directional. If something happened in ECW, it has to happen in Salesforce so that when we start connecting Marketing Cloud and understanding patient interactions, patient emails, patient anything for anything we wanted to do, I needed both systems talking to each other. That was probably the most challenging part in our transformation roadmap. So how did this go down? We had discovery alignment, a needs assessment. So everything I just sort of went through, we sat down in a room and we said, what are all the must-haves? We did data alignment. That was us sitting down with our data team, with our finance and analytics team, and just saying, what's all the data we need? Integration partner. We really needed to do some RFPs to understand what's the lay of the land. We didn't pretend that we knew how to develop within Salesforce, nor did we pretend that we knew how to pull the data out of ECW and get it into Salesforce. We did have to partner with MuleSoft and Snowflake to do that. We are very fortunate that our PE firm had resources and talent and skill to be able to work with us and partner with us on this. But the Salesforce build itself, part 2, we went with Marketing Cloud, Health Cloud, and the CRM, and it all required a custom build. That required weekly meetings, 2 to 3 times a week. We had to match all our patient records to Salesforce. That meant like every single interaction in ECW needed to match to a custom type in Salesforce. That meant matching all of our operations data, all of our clinical data, everything. Then once we got to that ECW integration part, that meant a separate project build for that bi-directional workflow. If you've ever worked directly with ECW, you do know that that was quite the challenge. And I owe everything to my finance and analytics team there, because I would not have gotten through it without them. This was not a marketing project at all. And then once we got to the rollout, this was always leave more time than you think for a rollout. We had to test the marketing form transitions internally. So my marketing team had to start custom building those forms, bringing over all that GTM tracking, working with FreshPaint to make sure that everything we built originally with Jotform was going to migrate over. Breaking CAPTCHA 52 times, figuring out why it wasn't working, recoding the forms with Cardinal another 52 times, moving all those marketing journeys over into Salesforce, training our intake team. And then now we're in the process of migrating everything over and then matching all the marketing training for our marketing journeys and nurture streams. Now we're at the point where we're turning that data into insights, building custom lead reports, dashboards, mapping call center dispositions, patient journeys. And we're getting, to this point where we have one source of truth, which is the dream, right? Appointment request comes in, the forms match with GTM, we have comprehensive tracking. Phone call leads are a work in progress. We did realize that we needed another system to do call tracking. Surprise, if you attended the line session yesterday, you probably learned why, as we did too. We are working on Marketing Cloud, getting our nurturing in there, getting all of our emails in there. I think the coolest part for me, which I'm going to share some screenshots in just a second, is that all of our marketing nurtures now are no longer time-based, they are clinical encounter-based. If a patient cancels, immediately we are able to trigger, based on that clinical encounter, a marketing nurture. If a patient checks out from an appointment, like I said, our non-operative side of the business is a 6-step appointment flow. Appointment 1, checkout, triggers an email. We have big dreams for our surgery patients to start triggering time based on their clinical checkouts. 3 months post-surgery, email. 6 months post-surgery, email. 1 year, congratulations, you made it. Really allows us to not just focus on patient acquisition, but also maintaining and re-engaging with that patient. Which is something that obviously anybody in healthcare knows is just as important as getting that patient. In terms of the intake team, we know that even though these patients are requesting the appointment, calling those patients and scheduling is, of course, really important as well. We can work directly with them now to build campaigns and emails that get sent out to them immediately. Whereas with our prior email marketing system not being directly connected, we were not able to control it as easily. Now everything is automatically triggered. And again, because it's tied to ECW, it's triggered by those patient engagements. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. So these screenshots, which I'm going to talk you through a little bit here, are live from our Salesforce workflow that we have built. So building this integration and foundation is really kind of just a water break, right? Like we get in there and now we have to go in and, start using it. So what you can see here, and this is a dummy lead, Oliver Fielding is my employee's son. So no HIPAA breaches were made here, is kind of an example of what it looks like when a lead comes in here at PRM. So this is a real patient that goes through. You can see everything that is happening. You can see all of our leads and flow through them. Immediate learnings for us was our phone system needed to be integrated, right? Like our intake team would get this lead coming in from a form and then use our phone system, which is incredible, but we couldn't see any of that like automatically. It required manual tagging. And the data is complex. So how could we understand what was happening on the phone and how could we get, the tracking we needed? So we needed more tools to get that done. But immediately, for those of you who do this every day for a living, wow, this is incredible data that we didn't have before. Instead, we used to just have a jot form and then they would go ahead and create that ECW record. Why I mentioned they create that ECW record, this is real time. The second this comes in, this lead is going into ECW. If this patient gets scheduled in ECW and say the office realizes that they need to make some changes to the patient's insurance, date of birth is different, or Oliver's a bad example, but say Mike comes in, but Mike's name is Michael. Well, that's going to get updated with that lead as well. It's all bi-directional. No more manual data entry there. Saves a lot of time. So what's the lead status framework? And thank you to Howie for building this beautiful framework here so that I didn't have to. As marketers, we love that. In our Salesforce instance, there's 7 statuses, typical for every marketer. We have disqualified, new, pending. I'm not going to read the slide. Hate when people do that. But what happens here, and this is a real lead, you can see the call center rep work through it, is she starts working through her call center flow. And all of these are clinical encounters that are happening in ECW. So as she's processing through her lead and starts acting on things that are clinical encounters, say she gets to that new patient scheduled and she converts her lead up here in the top, that moves this lead right over to ECW. Now she schedules that patient in ECW and this lead becomes an account. Now, all of this stuff before those purplish boxes are pending. This lead's created, she's contacting, you can see all of her notes, you can see all of her activity, you can see all of her intake data. My CEO can go in here at any time he wants and go through these leads. And trust me, he does. I can go in here and filter through these leads. We've actually built dashboards out of these leads. You can see the whole lead life cycle here and the call dispositions and when it starts moving to ECW. And this is all trigger-based, automatic. It's not manual. All the call center is doing is just going through this process. And it takes the time down from when I first started at PRM, they would have to be manually copying and pasting things. I would say it's going from 30 minutes to seconds. So now we're looking at a complete lead. This lead has gone all the way through. This lead has been scheduled. So the prior screen, we saw a lead that was being worked and actioned. This patient has been scheduled. So I'm showing you here, top, she's been already scheduled. You can see her through. Down at the bottom, you can actually see her intake questionnaire. So this is the form she filled out on the PRM website. You can see what she wrote in as her reason for visit. You can go so far here on the bottom left to see her account. So this now is what she's converted into ECW. Now, you don't have to log into ECW to see any of this information. You can see when she converted, when her first visit's going to be, and then all the other information you need to understand. If she had further appointments scheduled, you'd see every single appointment, which for marketing is incredible because now I can tie all my marketing comms to that in Marketing Cloud. I can tie a reminder about her visit. I can tie a follow-up after her visit. Say she cancels. Now I'm sending a cancellation email to her to try to get her back on the schedule. I'm nurturing her throughout her entire journey because all the information is in here, as opposed to prior, what we would do is use ECW to send the email. Again, if you use ECW, they're charging you, I don't know, 50 cents every time you text, $1 every time you email. With Salesforce, it's all in here and it's all custom. We can do whatever we want in here and make it beautiful. Again, get all the email tracking, build it into the patient journey. And if I can move my own slides, end up building into a dashboard. Now, our dashboard, like all good marketing dashboards, starts with an Excel sheet because why wouldn't it? So this Salesforce data starts into this beautiful dashboard. This dashboard, quite honestly, is how we forecast everything at PRM. So you see all the leads that flow into Salesforce. Then our MPV data comes from, again, our clinical data, our ECW data. Then marketing is able to say, based on these conversion rates that you are seeing go across, we can start to forecast, okay, in each office, the average conversion rates from the leads. Then we go bottom up. If the average conversion rate in Atlanta is 60% and we need to get 100 patients in Atlanta, how many leads do we need to generate? How much money do we need to spend? And then we can start forecasting from there. And this is all basically determined by each marketing source as well. Where did the lead originate from? And how can we go from there? And then we start to budget. And then every single week, we review this to determine, are we on track to hit our goals? Do we need to adjust spend? And we break it down by surgery and non-op because those two businesses are different. This is far more advanced than we were when I first started, where we were just relying on Google to tell us what to do. Now we are actually looking at the data coming out of Salesforce, where it's telling us how our leads are converting across funnel. And then we are looking at how it's converting in the offices. So they're converting across funnel from lead to NPS. Now, how are they turning into actual patients in terms of visits and admits? And then finally, we are using the dashboards in Salesforce to drive those decisions. This dashboard right here is executive level. You can click into any of these. You can look at the real-time leads coming in. You can look at them from location. We can look at agent level. So this is our call center team. I can say, how is Christina doing on converting her leads? We can take a look at the source. We can look at the UTM codes. We can start to make decisions real time. So an Excel sheet, as we know, is only as real time as the people that are building that Excel sheet. With Salesforce, I can refresh this every minute. I can look at what's going on. I can look at how the leads are converting. I can click into every single lead and start to understand how they're converting in real time. And that is really like, we're no longer optimizing for those clicks. We're optimizing for the booked appointments. The leads are predictable. The revenue is forecasted, and that CAC is really understood, which for us, that was really the final piece of the puzzle. Of course, like I've mentioned, there are some missing pieces, right? We talked a lot about forms here. We're bringing in call tracking. We are actively looking at bringing in a system like Line so that when inbound calls come in, we get the same level of detail. There's a lot of lessons that we learned. Cross-functional ownership was key. It's not just a marketing project. We need data hygiene and naming conventions. Over communication. What does the lead really mean to everybody? I mentioned that dashboards are designed for daily usability and not just reporting. Like the Excel sheet is great because it lets us forecast that growth, but the Salesforce dashboards are great because they're real-time updated. I would say if you guys are going to do this yourselves, how do you replicate the model? Audit your data ecosystem immediately. Where are the silos? Align with your stakeholders on the shared definitions of success. Ensure your data is clean. Don't upload a bunch of data into Salesforce and then ask yourselves why there's a million duplicates. Work with your data team if you have it. to make sure that you all agree that this is the data you want to update, and build your governance early. Don't let 52 people decide like what the data is going to be, because if someone makes a change in ECW and then Salesforce isn't informed, you're going to have a mess. And then tie everything to revenue impact. Because once you have Salesforce in place, that's really the only thing that matters. For us, that's how we went to have a growth engine. I mean, that original dashboard I showed you now looks like this, where I can understand how every office is converting. I can understand what the cost per lead is, what the cost per schedule is, the cost per admit is. I'm no longer just saying like, yeah, my CAC is $22 a lead, $22 a conversion. I'm actually understanding like, yeah, I'm spending $365 to get an admin in the office. And it's all because I'm able to match all of my lead data down funnel. We really just have a seat at the revenue table at this point. And so I would say, you know, I know we're right at time, but I've seen the chat going crazy, and I know there's like 5 minutes before the next one if anybody has any questions. But please do connect with me on LinkedIn, email me, however you want to get in touch with me. I think this project, while it took us 2 years, was probably like the best 2 years spent, and we're still, you know, we're still refining it. I think it's every marketer's dream to get this level of data. So I appreciate everyone joining, listening. I hope this was helpful. Implementation cost is a question that came up. Definitely, it was a upfront cost for us to implement, but I think savings wise, we probably at this point now, because we have visibility into every single lead, every single thing our intake team is doing, I would say like well worth the upfront cost. You know, at this point, there's actually tools that we probably can get rid of, and costs that we can remove. And I would say if Drew is still here, he probably would respond and say that it's well worth the expense to get all of this data implemented. There's actually been times where I've said we don't need to increase marketing spend because I have such visibility into what we're spending and how we're optimizing it, which no, I don't think any marketing leader has ever said, no, we don't need to increase spend. It was certainly a well worth implementation cost. And I know there's like a ton of questions in here, but I'm, you know, thrilled to answer any questions via LinkedIn. Like I said, I know you guys all need to get to the next session. So thank you so much. And I'm happy to connect with anybody in the lobby. I'll be in there all day on LinkedIn, but thank you again, everyone. And I'll hopefully see you all next year.